transform how the U.S. sells arms to foreign allies and partners. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and War Secretary Pete Hegseth explaining President Trump's America First arms transfer strategy. In an op-ed on USA Today, Rubio and Hegseth say Trump's executive order helps change how weapons are produced and delivered. They argue that timeliness is key, but there are long waiting lists under today's system. The Trump administration aims to change that by designing exportability into the systems from the very beginning and proactively selling to allies based on what America needs. Rubio and Hegseth say, quote, America needs partners with complementary, not necessarily identical capabilities. They argue Trump's strategy will shorten wait times, create new manufacturing capability, and build resilience across supply chains. Joining us to discuss this is Armen Kurdian, foreign policy and national security analyst. He's also a retired U.S. Navy captain. So Armen, good afternoon. You heard what this administration wants to do just now. Could you walk us through exactly how the changes I talked about earlier that the War Secretary and State Secretary said, how will this change the U.S. And other nations in terms of selling weapons?
Good afternoon, Don. So first of all, the United States has found itself in a place where in the era of complex weapons, it takes a very long time from the moment you even put something on contract to when it is actually delivered, let alone when something is developed. And these timelines have demonstrated a weakness in our acquisition workforce and our acquisition industrial base because we see we can expend weapons very, very quickly, but it's very, very hard to replace. We can overcome that through economic order quantities by getting our allies to purchase some of these weapons, also help having them participate in the development of some of these things, putting their requirements into some of our weapons so that we can all build one weapon that we can all use. It also makes it easier to sustain and support these kinds of weapons over the long term. Now, by bringing foreign allies into the acquisition system earlier in some of these development programs, it gives them a little bit more of a skin in the game at the same time that we continue to work with the European allies in terms of, the types of mission sets that we need to operate together, the types of operations in various parts of the world that we need to work together, whether it's the European theater, the Middle East, and building those common requirement sets will help facilitate the procurement and the manufacture of these weapons. But there is still some work to be done in the industrial base in order to make that happen.
Okay, so let me ask you a rather fundamental question here, Armen. Why is it that so many countries want U.S. weapons? Because Rubio and Hegseth say that U.S. weapon sales remain at an all-time high with 43% of the global market share.
Frankly, it's because as challenging as our industrial base is, the European allies have even greater challenges at the same time. The U.S. builds the best weapons. We have the best missiles. We have the best aircraft. We have the best logistics and sustainment capacities. Frankly, I think a lot of Americans need to understand that while we have a big technological edge in weaponry over our adversaries, what is the biggest game changer and what is the biggest advantage we have is our ability to sustain and support those weapons over the long term. China, Russia, even the European allies don't have the ability to sustain long-term combat operations or support our weapons as much as we do. And our system certainly isn't perfect, and a lot of weaknesses have come to light over the last several years. So that is a big reason why the allies still want to be part of a lot of our foreign military sales. Plus, at the same time, it relieves them of the development cost. And as I said, when you have more countries buying the same kind of weapon, it drives down the overall cost. And we've seen that to some degree, for example, with the F-35, or with our armored personnel carriers, or with tanks, or even with howitzers and simpler weapons, or even vehicles. This is a truism of economics, and it's just as true in acquisition as it is in the commercial space.
So you said earlier that the U.S.'s weapons have a clear edge over other countries' weapons. How big is that edge? And do you think it's worth it for countries to wait sometimes, years apparently, before actually getting their hands on those weapons?
Well, it's a clear edge, but it's also a very expensive edge when you look at, GPS or precision navigation, when you look at, energetics, when you look at alloys and scientific technology that we put into our weapons. Maintaining that edge, submarines, it doesn't matter what aspect of warfare it is. is very, very expensive. But we've seen the efficacy of U.S. weapons on the battlefield, especially when going head to head with other adversaries. And you can't really put a price. Maybe you can put a price on it, this price of a soldier or an airman or a sailor in terms of how much it actually costs to develop and train that individual. But beyond that is, of course, the intangible about human life and the amount of lives that can be saved through technology. We've seen throughout history that countries, even if they have their industrial base, I mean, this happened to Germany in the Second World War. They were still able to produce weapons at a rapid pace towards the end of that war, but they'd lost all their people. Same was true with Japan. They'd lost all their senior airmen. They lost all their experienced people. You cannot replace expertise nearly as fast as you can replace weapons. So that is something that it basically it drives the technology, because the faster you can complete a war, the faster you can complete a military objective, to the extent that you're not losing some of your own forces or some of your own people, is a big component of military success on the battlefield.
So what would it mean if allies shifted to other non-U.S. suppliers for these weapons?
Well, if they did, I think they would quickly learn that perhaps that it's not in their best interest to do so, and they eventually always come back to us to work. Foreign military sales, you see FMS ingrained on all of our program offices and all the services. You see foreign representatives, even foreign military as well, who are operating with us. Our program offices. You have representatives from other countries who are over here representing their interests at the same time. It's not to say that there may not be some times where a foreign country has a better missile. I mean, the U.S. has bought foreign equipment at the same time. We sometimes we go and say, hey, this works really well for us. This meets our requirements. The sustainment works. Maybe we have a logistics facility built in the U.S. to sustain these weapons that are built overseas, and that it actually works. So it can be a two-way street at the same time. But ultimately, a lot of these countries, you might consider, well, you might want to make a political decision in terms of buying a weapon from one country versus another. But at the end of the day, you've got to support your military. And that's why they keep coming back to the U.S.
So, Armin, I just want to ask you one more question. How do we shorten that wait time? Is it difficult? And how does Trump's America First arms transfer strategy, which he signed as an executive order, how does that fit into all this?
It requires a lot of things, Don. It requires investment in facilities, investment in manpower, investment in scientific technology, investment of the industrial base. There's a lot of things that we need to do. Ultimately, I like calling it the infinite dollar problem. If you say you have an infinite amount of money and I want to buy as many, say, missiles as I possibly can, or as many tanks as I possibly can, what's the next bottleneck or the or blockage in terms of how many I can actually buy? And in terms of our industrial base, our major primes, they want to know that there is actually a level demand kind of going forward. They don't like demand, say, I'm buying 100 this year, 100 next year, 1,000 the next year, and then 100 the next year. That doesn't work for them. So it also involves the U.S. working with those primes in order to make it easier for them to actually go and build. At the same time, reducing a lot of the overhead burden that they got to deal with. So there is a lot involved with making it happen. And right now, under this Secretary of War, they are looking very hard. It is priority number one to accelerate and streamline the acquisition workforce, the acquisition industrial base, in order to make that happen.
Okay, Armin, thank you so much for speaking with us today. Very good.
Thanks, Don.
The U.S. government conducts the first ever air transportation of a nuclear microreactor. What officials say this could mean for the future of domestic